Hello, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm really excited to be able to take a look at Superman, the Triangle Era Volume 2 from DC Comics. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that that era of comics, specifically Superman in the 90s, that is my favorite era of comics, and it's my favorite story, favorite ongoing series of all time. I mean, when you take a look at Superman, I've heard so many times people say, "Oh, it's hard to write for. There's not as many good stories because he's difficult to write," and I don't believe that because the Superman in the 90s, the post-crisis John Byrne era on all the way through the late 90s. There's some really wonderful Superman stories to be found, and I'm so glad that DC Comics has been going back and releasing. Last year they gave us the Triangle Era Volume 1. I have a video on the channel that talks about everything that's in that book. Before we dive into what's actually inside this book, I do want to take some time to talk about the context of when these stories were created and why these stories are very important, and why this book in particular is one that I think is worth picking up, even if we have the back half of this book is the death of Superman and the funeral for a friend storylines. Now, we have those stories printed so many times. So the question becomes, why do I need this volume? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll dive into the specific contents of the book itself. In talking about why I think you should pick up this book, full disclosure, I'm somebody who will pick up any version of this story and how it's printed. There's we have the absolute death of Superman that is coming out, which we haven't gotten before. Now I'm one that was there in the 90s. I bought the original issues as they were coming out. I went back and also I've bought the sealed collector packs because they printed so many of these comics, they were everywhere. And I obviously have my original trade paperbacks, the death and the return. I've shown it off in the channel before, but the death and return omnibus that I have, I've purchased this omnibus multiple times. I have my original Superman 75 signed by a bunch of the creators. That one's still sealed because, got to put my kid through college, right? Now, and then last year was a couple years ago, we had the 30th anniversary of death of Superman. Now, so I have purchased this story in almost every format in which it was offered. And, so why does my recommendation carry any weight in saying why I think you should buy this book? I'll put it this way. The death and return of Superman so many times gets slammed for being a gimmick. It gets talked about as being something that was just a cash grab. I disagree with that sentiment, because now it did become a marketing juggernaut. It became something well beyond what it was originally intended to be. And that's when, the DC Comics, when they see the opportunity to make money is there, they're going to do that. And why shouldn't they? So there was, there were trading cards, there was a video game, there's the death and return of Superman that was on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis at the time. It was everywhere. It was such a huge deal. It got so many people buying, speculating comics. The sales were crazy. Terrible idea to speculate on those, but they were selling them, and it was so super popular. So there's that stigma of the kind of the market crash of the 90s. There's that stigma that gets attached to the death of Superman because of that, and it's entirely unfair because, again, when this story was conceived, it was something that in the 90s things were dark. The characters were darker. Punisher, Ghost Rider, the vigilante anti-hero type characters were very popular, and there was Superman. Superman is someone who stands for wholesome, doing the right thing, being kind, setting a good example, and that was not something that was selling in the 90s. Even though we were getting so many great Superman stories, no one was really reading them. And so the question became, how do we get through to people on why these stories matter, why this character matters? And then the concept came about, well, why don't we just kill him? And, they did. So there was the death of Superman, and, but that wasn't the story. The story that they were telling was why Superman matters. So if you want to get to the heart of what the story is about, it's not the death of Superman. It's everything that happened afterwards. It's the funeral for a friend, the world without a Superman storyline. That's the meat and potatoes of why they were telling this story. The death of Superman, just one big fight, great art, love it. But story-wise, not super deep at all. It's just a quick-paced fight. And so, it is what it is. And it's fair to say that story is lacking, because it is. It's more of a visual treat, a good comic. I still like it. But what it's all about is everything that happens afterwards. Some of the stories that are in here have not been reprinted before. They're available on the DC Infinite app. You can read them digitally, but they've not been reprinted. And this volume gives us a great opportunity to see the things that were happening leading up to the death. And those are the things that are often forgotten about. The creatives involved were firing on all cylinders, through the leadership of Mike Carlin, the Superman editor at the time, and how he was able to have the multiple creative teams, each on their own separate Superman story, all tell their own stories, as well as one big ongoing Superman story. The reason why I really feel that this is something special is because, like I said before, this gives you those stories that lead up to it, and it gives you this book ends at there was a publication break. So after the funeral for a friend storyline, there were no more Superman comics for a few months. At the time, it was being billed as the end. Now, obviously, that was not the end of Superman comics, and nor should anyone have believed that it fully was going to be the end of Superman comics. That just doesn't make sense, that they would just completely stop publishing Superman. But that didn't matter. To me, as when I was a teenage reader, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. But those are the kind of things that I was the perfect age to really buy into what was happening, to really be emotionally enthralled by the story, and deeply impacted by what was going on, by the emotions of the story, not just the death portion, but really the funeral stuff. That was some heavy stuff that as a teen reader, I just I was really impacted by, because it showed you what this hero meant, and not just it gave you the context of who this character was, how he impacted the lives of the citizens of Metropolis, and what it meant to lose him. And it was a conversation about within the confines of Metropolis and the story, but also to the world itself, to the real world. Why should the comics industry care about a character like Superman at a time when, like I said, things were very skewing violent, skewing darker, skewing the anti-hero. So and I think it does that successfully, because there's a lot of things that I read in the 90s that I liked at the time as a teenager, and you go back and revisit them, and the art, I still enjoy the art, but some of the stories don't really resonate or capture my imagination as much as they did. But you could go back and read these Superman stories, and they still are the core of who the character is, and they remain some of the best Superman stories that you can read. A lot of times people will mention standalone stories like Superman for All Seasons, All-Star Superman, or these self-contained Superman stories that are all good in their own right. But when you look for an ongoing, you've got years of stories from the same creative, the same leadership, and they're tough to beat. They're tough to beat to when you go back and look at. If you want to look at multiple facets of the character, it's all here. I like that you can read this book, you can read the stories that lead up to it, and then you get that emotional end. You get it captures the idea that this was the end. Now, in every other collected edition that we've gotten so far, this was just a chapter break. It was essentially you get to the funeral for a friend and then immediately start with the return of Superman. Here, you're left with a sense of, oh, that's the end. That's how this book closes out. And I love that they did that. I love that you can. We still have the Superman, the death and return of Superman omnibus that has the whole thing. You still have Volume 1 of Triangle Era, Volume 2 of the Triangle Era, and they present the story in a different way. And I think that's all you can ask for when I think they did this intelligently. When it comes to reprinting the Triangle Era, I'm glad they provided us something different. Instead of, because at one point I thought they were just going to have this be a smaller volume and then just reprint the Death and Return Omnibus as a Triangle Era, a new Triangle Era Volume 3. Now Volume 3 will start with the Return of Superman. So you get that fresh start, and that's going to be at the beginning of the book. And I think that's great. I love that. I love that it gives us something different and a different way to present the stories. Now what we'll do is we'll switch up the camera, and then we'll do a top-down look at the actual contents of the book. Here's the cover that you get, the spine. There's the Triangle Era Volume 2, and then the back cover. Great image. Now we have the dust jacket off. It's the S shield made up of a bunch of smaller S shields, which is pretty cool. And then you get there's the spine again, and then the back cover, same. So we'll open it up. There's the front sheet. There's a nice DPS from Panic in the Sky. And here's your table of contents. So you get an introduction by Mark Carlin. You get the Metropolis mailbag issue to kick it off, which is a great standalone issue. We'll talk about that a little more in a couple of minutes here. And then it followed up with another Christmas issue, Christmas in Suicide Slumberland. And then it jumps right into Panic in the Sky. So you get all these issues, all Panic in the Sky, some kind of standalone stuff. Man of the Hour talks about Lex Luthor II. That's actually, a big plot point that runs throughout the Triangle Era is the death of Lex Luthor, which we saw in the Triangle Era Volume 1. And so you learn more about Lex Luthor II, and it jumps into, there's some kind of Panic in the Sky epilogue type issues, and a bunch of, kind of more standalone-ish stories here. A great two-part story of Superman and Robin, and then it jumps into the second kind of second story, second multi-issue story, which is the Blaze Satanis War. There's a second page of the table of contents. So this is a great two-part, The Crisis at Hand, Part 1 and 2, which is talks about it's Superman addressing the issue of domestic abuse and domestic violence, and that's a really impactful two-issue story. And then you jump into kind of the Death of Superman prelude issues, where you get the Doomsday teasers, and then the rest of it is Death of Superman all the way through, and then followed by Funeral for a Friend all the way to Part 8, and then in an intermix there they kind of put the Legacy of Superman, which was published after Funeral for a Friend, but they kind of slotted it in to where it makes sense in the story, which is really cool. And then it closes off with some of the content that they came out with afterwards, which is the Supergirl Team Luthor Special number 1 and Newstime Life and Death of Superman number 1 from May of '93, and then it jumps into some bonus material. So there's the 2-page introduction by Mike Carlin, and this actually addresses the Crisis at Hand story, which is an homage to events that happened in Action Comics number 1. Then starts off with the Metropolis mailbag, and this is a really strong standalone issue with Superman, who receives mail all throughout the year, and then once a year he decides that he's going to answer these letters. The story it's a reminder of what Superman can and cannot do, and what people expect of him versus the reality of, he can't cure diseases. There's things that he just can't do. Really impactful issue. Love this one. This is the Christmas time in Suicide Slumberland, which is some great Tom Grumman artwork. And then, so then we jump into Panic in the Sky, which what I love about having this story in the same book that contains the death of Superman is Panic in the Sky is a story that it shows Superman's role in the greater DC universe and as a leader, and really having this story in this same book and then reading the death right after, not right after, but soon after, it provides great context. It shows again what the world of the DC universe lost with his death. And some great Bogdanov art. Some of John Bogdanov's art, his best art, is actually in the some of these early Man of Steel stuff where his style channeled a lot of the Fleischer energy, the Fleischer cartoon. And actually, yeah, there's this page here, which is an homage to the cartoon where he's, punching the lasers, kind of choreographed with the music. Yeah, it's a classic Fleischer cartoon from the 40s, and love it. I love that it's homaged here. And again, it just shows off that where these guys, where the creators, their past with Superman and their history with the character, and it all kind of comes out through these stories. So Panic in the Sky is a story that features Brainiac, largely features Brainiac coming to attack Earth, and it's all about Superman doing what he can to rally the troops, and how they rally under Superman's leadership. And then here's after Panic in the Sky. There's that Men of the Hour, is the issue I was talking about, where they it's kind of a profile on Lex Luthor II. You see Lex is involved in some some shenanigans against some enemies within LexCorp, always kind of plotting. This issue, this is cool, but this is another follow-up from Panic in the Sky, but what it also does is it sets up a lot of some of the underworld plot threads that you see in Man of Steel during the beginning of Death of Superman. When it kicks off in Man of Steel 18, you get Keith kind of dealing with this underworld plot thread, but that actually is kind of set up in some of the events here. This is it's called Another Panic in the Sky. It's some of the Warworlders, and then they eventually team up with some of the Cadmus Underworlders, and that frames how their actions throughout, and then it kind of leads to the confrontation, like I said, in the Man of Steel 18. That's great. That's a great page. Another kind of important issue where you see the developing relationship between Supergirl and Lex Luthor II. Now, again, those are things that if you had just read Death of Superman, you don't understand why is Supergirl aligned with Lex and what's going on there. But you get some of those stories. It's great stuff that just sets up those story elements. I always like that panel where Superman flies in Lois's window and then does the quick change back to Clark. A lot of times you see the change from Clark to Superman, but in this one you get the change back to Clark, which is pretty cool. Some more. Oh man, yeah. There's some great art throughout here. There's some more great Bogdanov art. Oh, yeah, super cool. Let's see. Let's skip ahead. This is a cool issue. Superman number 68. This is an issue that actually crossed over with the second part of this story. Is actually an issue of Deathstroke's series. But having Deathstroke team up with the heroes in Panic in the Sky, he kind of worked with Superman. You got that before. But then, after those events, he finds himself at odds with Superman, and there's a story of those two kind of going against each other. Yeah. Continued in Terminator number 12. All right, you get some of the Cerberus elements. There's a plot thread that came through. I have to say this is not my favorite plot thread that went through the Triangle Era, and I was kind of it set up a lot of things that I think began back in Man of Steel number 1, of this big thread of Cerberus, and it kind of didn't really go anywhere. It fizzled out. I kind of feel like they had to abandon certain things, and that unfortunately that felt like a casualty of time constraints or whatever it was. But the Cerberus storyline kind of came to an abrupt end. You get some Superman and Agent Liberty interactions going on. There's Superman, Man of Steel, number 14. This is the 2-part issue, Night of the Bat, which is the Superman and the new Robin of the time, Tim Drake. This is their first meeting, and they team up and fight some vampires. So you get some great Bela Lugosi likeness there. And where's that? Vampire Hunter Jimmy. That always cracks me up. But yeah, this is a really fun two-part story. And then after this one, it gets into the Blaze Satanis War. So this is two demonic siblings that they have a sibling rivalry that the citizens of Metropolis. Oh, there you go, sibling rivalry. The citizens of Metropolis get caught up in their interactions. And it's another one. It's a story that gets kind of forgotten about because it's sandwiched between Panic in the Sky and then the death of Superman. But it's fun. There's these demonic characters that come. They come in the Newstime building. then the Newstime building gets transported to hell, and yeah, it's just, again, it's just a story that it highlights a lot of the citizens of Metropolis, and that's a hallmark of the stories of the time. Towards the end of Blaze the Thanos War, Superman gets kind of flung out into space, and he interacts with the character Kismet. And now this is a character that, if you've only read the Death and Return of Superman, during the events of Adventures of Superman 500, Superman interacts with Kismet. And at the time when I first read it, I was like, I don't really know what's going on. But this is a story that kind of sets up their interaction, and then it makes sense a lot more later on. And then you get here, here's Crisis at Hand. Is that the 2-issue story where he deals with the issue of domestic violence, and again harkens back to classic-looking Superman. Great Bogdanov art. I'd say that a lot, and again, Bogdanov is one, I've said it multiple times. He's one that yeah, this right here, this is a really powerful Jurgens breeding cover. I've come to appreciate his art so much more over time than I did before. And you come into, here's Man of Steel 17. This is the first issue where you get that Doomsday cameo. So there's, and it's the first part of, when I talked about the beginning of Death of Superman, where Keith is interacting with the Underworlders, you get the first part of that story here. And at the end of the issue, you get that first Doomsday cameo. And then Superman 73, which is a Wave Rider and Superman story. And actually, one thing I should mention, it's kind of cool because each of these issues, these Doomsday preview cameo issues, each of the panels at the end of each issue, kind of, maybe not the last page, somewhere in the last page, it foreshadows death. This kind of foreshadows the famous fist panel, the layout of that. So it's talking about violence, and it says if they don't hand it over fast, we reach out our fist and we take it. So it's kind of alluding to violence, but more so it's just it mimics that panel there. And then in the end of this issue, here it says, "Sorry folks, looks like massive cardiac arrest. Nothing we do, nothing anyone can do except the linear men. They can bring the dead back to life. No wonder they scare me. It's over, Grandpa." So yeah, this is Wave Rider, Matthew Rider as a kid, and seeing his grandfather pass away, but it's foreshadowing death, and that the linear men can go back and alter history, but this is an issue that kind of shows why they can't always alter history, and that's a good setup to another story that is in the legacy of Superman, which is why they did not interact and save Superman. At the end of this one, there's Superman interacting with Lex, and it says, if I depended solely on brawn, my crime-fighting career wouldn't have lasted 20 minutes, Lex. So again, it's alluding to his career ending. And yeah, so then there's the Night of the Jackal, and then at the end of this issue, let's see, what's the it says, it's a good foreshadowing. It says, "Too bad, Harry. Looks like you found out the hard way. It don't matter how tough you are, there's always someone out there who's bigger and stronger. That's the person who's bigger and stronger." So Doomsday, and then Doomsday breaks out. Doomsday is here. And then it kicks off into the death of Superman. And we all know that story, so that's get you all of those. You get the, and yes, the gatefold is there. That's cool. And then let's get towards the end, and we'll show the stuff. Yeah, so here's the, this is where it left. It left it at the end of Funeral for a Friend. It looks like Pa Kent passed away. Clark, Superman is gone, and that was it. That was the end. These were published afterwards. The Supergirl and Team Luthor special. Some events kind of showed what they were doing in the immediate aftermath of Superman's death. And then you get the Newstime issue, which is, again, there's some more foreshadowing. Things are booming in Coast City. Yeah, for sure. I love that foreshadow events of the return of Superman. But yeah, it's great. You get like this, the table of the table of contents there. Just a bunch of articles, like in-universe articles that talk about the different characters. There's all these these ads. Jimmy's Turtle Boy That's good. Good old solder cola. Yeah. So just some great things in here. And then yeah, that was it. That was that was showcasing that the end of Superman. And those are the things that came out at the time, just to kind of keep the interest going, to bridge that gap into the return of Superman. But at the time, like I said, we didn't really know that was on its way. This really captures that pause in publication. It's the end of the book, and you get the end of Superman stories until, of course, we know what's after that. But here, let's take a look at the bonus section. You get the introduction. You get Roger Stern's introduction from Panic in the Sky, the 1993 edition, and there's an afterwards by Mike Carlin from that same 1993 collected edition. And this one is the Mike Carlin's introduction to the for the 2007 Superman Omnibus. But then you get some of the trade paperback covers here, which is the 2016 edition. And I think I think 2016 was the last time we have seen Panic in the Sky printed. I think so. We're coming up on 10 years of this story out of print. I believe. I think that's true. Then you get some of the Death Superman 75 bagged issues. You get the trade paperback cover. You get the original Bogdanov trade paperback cover, and then this is from a later edition, Grummett War Without a Superman, and then the Funeral for a Friend cover. And that was the original, the omnibus from 2007, and then the omnibus cover from whatever that was, 2017, 2018, whenever that came out. Get some pinups that were in the Team Luthor special, and yeah, and then here's some Doomsday sketches. The original, when Dan Jurgens first kind of plotted out the character, drew him on some legal pads. These are scans of those original sketches, which is really, really cool. There's the article. This was included in the bagged edition of Superman 75. Some t-shirts, classic t-shirt designs, and then some of the original art scans, which I love seeing these. I would love to see as many of these as we possibly can, just because I as a fan of the original art, just always love seeing any of this stuff that we can. There's multiple. Then you get these, which are the plotting out. These are great. When they had the Superman summits, when we get all the creators together for the year, and they would map out the 4 interconnected titles: Man of Steel, Superman, Adventures of Superman, and Action Comics. To make sure that the things that needed to line up would line up at the time. And yeah, so they would get together once a year and map out the plot. So you get here's the plot chart for Panic in the Sky, and then the Blaze Satanus War, and then you get the Death of Superman and Funeral for a Friend, which is great. I love seeing those. And then there's some biographies in here as well. One thing to mention about this page, while I do love seeing who's here, it's Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Roger Stern, Louise Simonson, John Bogdanov, Tom Grummett, and Jackson Butch Geist, who we unfortunately lost earlier this year. It's great to see who's here, but what I would really like to have seen, some of the other creatives involved added on here as well. Maybe a second page of biographies. But you get the inkers. The inkers are a big part of the creative team pairing, because those teams were consistent throughout the Triangle era. But guys like Dennis Janke, Denis Rodier, Brett Breeding, Doug Hazelwood, they were always the mainstays of the inkers on those books. And also another one that I'd love to see on here is Glenn Whitmore, because as the colorist who colored all of these stories, I've said it before, he's the creative glue that kind of connects all of those different artistic styles into a very visually connected story with the same color palette. So again, I understand why they typically focus on writers and artists, but you can't forget those inkers and colorists too. And there you go. There's a look at the contents of this book. I love this series. I'm glad that they're finally printing these off in giving us nice collected editions of the Triangle era. I can easily recommend these stories to anyone who's looking for something else. I mean, if they haven't read these stories before, the Triangle Era Volume 1 is a great place to start. Now, if you want to take it back further and really start at the post-crisis launch, start with the John Byrne Man of Steel stuff. That's the foundation of what these stories are all about. So that's the true starting point if you really want to start the Triangle Era. Read those stories first. I really hope that we're able to continue this series of collected editions, because it's worth revisiting. Thank you very much for watching this one, and I will see you soon.